Let's start with some essential questions. How does art help us understand the lives of people of different times, places, and cultures? How does art preserve aspects of life? Batik is an Indonesian word and refers to a generic wax-resist dyeing technique used on textile. The technique is known to be more than 1,000 years old, possibly originating in ancient Egypt or Samaria. To make traditional batik, designs are hand-drawn with hot wax on prepared fabric using special tools called canton. Designs follow standardized patterns, some of which have been preserved for centuries. The wax is used to cover areas which are to be protected from the dye. The cloth is then dyed and additional areas are covered with wax before it is immersed in the second color of dye. This process is repeated until all the colors have been added. The making of a fine batik can take as long as 6 months, and such works are highly prized. The batik technique is known to be more than 1,000 years old. There is evidence that cloth decorated through some form of resist technique was in use in the early centuries CE. It is unclear whether the technique originated in one place or several. Archaeological evidence of the use of batik cloth has been found in Egypt, Persia, India, China, Japan, Indonesia, and other parts of Southeast Asia. In Africa, batik is found decorated with tribal patterns, in India with an ancient paisley patterns, and in China and Japan with delicate oriental motifs. There are more than 3,000 recorded patterns of batik, some of which have endured unchanged for centuries. Many patterns were intended for a particular use or were forbidden by commoners, such as batik Parang Ruza and batik Swat, which were reserved for exclusive use of royalty. The making of an intricate hand-drawn batik is a lengthy and painstaking process which, together with the dye baths, can take from 5 weeks to 6 months or more. Early in the 20th century, the Javanese developed copper blocks which can be used to stamp wax onto the cloth in intricate patterns much faster that can be done by hand painting. Batiks produced by this method are considered to be lower quality and be distinguished by slight irregularities at the place where the edges of the stamp pattern are joined. Traditionally, batik dyes were made from plants. The most widely used were indigo blue and soga, a warm brown color made from the bark of the soga tree. Complex recipes with esoteric substances such as chicken's blood, banana pulp, and fermented cassavas added to the dye bath to ward off evil were passed down through families. Dyeing was generally done by men, and rituals and taboos were observed to ensure a successful result. Contemporary artists use wax-resist processes to produce wall hangings and to decorate fabric in a unique fashion. A mixture of beeswax and paraffin is usually used. A greater portion of paraffin makes the wax more brittle and subject to crackling. Methods of applying the wax onto the fabric include pouring the liquid wax, painting the wax on with a brush, and applying the hot wax with an electric stylus or a stamp. After the last dyeing, the fabric is hung up to dry. Then it is dipped in a solvent to dissolve the wax, or ironed between paper towels or newspapers to absorb the wax and reveal deep, rich colors and the fine crinkle lines to give batik its character. Now let's talk about a modern batik artist, Tricia Langman. She recalls a childhood spent amid stacks of African prints and patterns. Langman trained in Britain, Paris, and New York, and it led her to a textile line that eventually launched in the early 90s. She created hand-painted Maasai-inspired dresses for Ralph Lauren and packaging for Clinique, and she sells lush floral patterns to The Gap and Calvin Klein. A collection of hand-dyed batik throws for Pendleton proved a natural union of the Northwest and her fascination with a technique rooted in Indonesia. She worked on a documentary about batik around the world. Current projects include a line of Japanese-inspired wall hangings for West Elm and sustainable textiles curriculum for the Art Institute. Now back to our essential questions. How does art help us understand the lives of people of different times, places, and cultures? How does art preserve aspects of life?